Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So we're going to clean up some of this movie-related news that we've gotten this week with a couple of extra tidbits and things to consider. We'll start with a couple of Daisy Ridley interview situations, basically. One referring to an older one and one referring to a comparatively recent one. But basically, in November of 2023, Daisy Ridley gave an interview. She was doing press for another movie, and you know how this goes. They got to talk to her about Star Wars. And she said that when she had done a previous interview way back earlier in the year, she had not yet been approached, and this was prior to Star Wars Celebration, about joining in a new Jedi Order movie. And so at the time, I guess she'd been getting asked, and she was saying, I'm not doing another one, I'm not doing another one. This puts me in mind also, of course, we just talked recently about Adam Driver's comments on the Smartless podcast and about he said, yeah, I'm not doing another one because the character's dead. That doesn't mean anything. Unless the person says, I'm never going to do Star Wars again, I don't want to do Star Wars again, then you can't assume that they're not going to be in a Star Wars movie. Now, the other thing about that we kind of all glossed over, I think, but now is finally occurring to us with the announcement of the Mandalorian and Grogu movie and the fact that it's going to quote-unquote lead the slate of movies from Lucasfilm, the upcoming slate of Star Wars movies, is that the Charmaine Obaid-Chinoy movie, which was being written or rewritten, I guess rewritten probably, by Stephen Knight, well, something happened with that basically, because the last we knew, just before the writer's strike, Stephen Knight was allegedly this close to delivering a draft of the script. And then the writer's strike stops, and I think it was September, and then here we are in November, and Daisy Ridley is saying in an interview that she hasn't yet seen a script for the movie. So I don't know if she necessarily needs to have seen a script by this point, assuming that they were on track for a May 2026 release. I mean, I think she would have had to have seen it sometime, within the next 6 months, basically. So maybe not necessarily at that moment, but that probably should have raised a red flag for us to say, if she hasn't seen a script yet, then I wonder if that really is going to happen, that May date, or if it's going to wind up being pushed to December, which is what we're basically thinking is going to happen now. And she also said in November that she knew the storyline for one film, which is a really interesting way to put things, because if it was only going to be one film, then you would probably say, I only know the storyline for the film, not one film. So naturally, that makes you think there's going to be more than one film, that this is an idea that expands beyond it. And when we talk about there being multiple movies in Star Wars, well, it's always trilogy talk, right? So now suddenly we're contemplating the possibility of a new Jedi Order trilogy happening here. And speaking of trilogies, we have basically 2 of 3 of a potential trilogy now that they announced that there's going to be a Mandalorian and Grogu movie, because in that announcement they said there's still going to be a Dave Filoni movie, so whatever he's doing, the cinematic event that's going to happen, that is still its own separate movie. So now we've basically got 2/3 of a trilogy announced, and how could that possibly lay out? Well, we've talked about how Mandalorian Season 4 could well happen and be released in the back half of 2025, and then we get a Mandalorian and Grogu movie in 2026. In the meantime, we also found out that the Ahsoka Season 2 is going to be in development, and Dave Filoni is working on that right now, has been working on it for a while, actually. It was only just confirmed earlier this week. And since Dave Filoni's movie has been presented to us basically as something that ties everything in together, so it seems like a major galactic event that has a lot of pieces leading up to it, you kind of get the idea that whatever a second movie in an informal trilogy would actually come out before Dave Filoni's movie. So we might actually get a Season 2 of Ahsoka and potentially even a Season 5 of The Mandalorian. They've talked about the potential of going 5 seasons previously, I believe, before we actually see that. So the movie slate may have expanded, and the TV slate may have expanded just from this one announcement that we got about The Mandalorian and Grogu. It may be even bigger than we necessarily realize. otherwise. And that's what I've got in wrapping up all of the movie and live action news that came from just that one little press release that we got earlier this week. And that is going to do it for this episode of the show. If you enjoy the podcast, I hope you'll please consider sharing it with other Star Wars fans and friends that you know, whether in person or online. I hope you'll also consider leaving a rating or review on your app of choice and subscribing or following, depending on what your app of choice calls it, too. That helps more people find the show with the algorithms and all that fun stuff. So thank you very much for considering doing that. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the show, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.